the way this world shall be when we go walking in it.
It's not right!
During the Great Depression, due to the downfall in economy, almost all countries worldwide suffered. On that one day, known as Black Tuesday, the lives of millions were changed. Not only in America, but all over the world, people were forced to leave their jobs and were left with almost nothing. By 1932, an estimated 30 million people were unemployed. Banks were shutting down left and right, causing inflation, and what little people had became almost worthless. It was especially excruciating for farmers in the Midwest due to a long-lasting drought. The Dust Bowl, caused by exposed dry topsoil being picked up by winds, caused large dust storms to occur and further hampered rainstorms from happening. The Great Depression was also a period known as the Dirty Thirties. This is because it started in 1929 and ended in 1939 when World War II began. During the Depression, segregation played a negative and unfortunate role. Because of segregation and racism against black people, it was much harder for them to survive on the little they had. It was hard enough with the economy dropping and the banks closing, but the black people had to deal with the fact that their jobs were being individually taken away as poor whites needed them. They were treated differently because of their skin color, and because of this, had a harder lifestyle. It had been like this in America for such a long time, and to the people that lived there, it was only normal. Americans said that the system was separate but equal, but in truth, what is equal about this? Nothing. Although the Civil War had ended slavery and several constitutional amendments had been established, conditions in the South had not changed dramatically for African Americans. Southern states had in place Jim Crow laws which enforced segregation. They were told where they could live, eat, go to school, and even pray. If an African American was caught breaking any of these laws, the punishments were severe. Ironically, the Great Depression did not have as big of an impact on blacks in the South as it did on whites, considering most blacks were already living in poverty due to the segregation. Conversely, although there was less enforced segregation in the North, African Americans felt a greater impact there during the Great Depression than those in the South did. This is because the quality of life for blacks in the North was better before the Depression started. And when the Great Depression began, blacks in both the North and South were often the first to lose their jobs. The jobs they could get were often ones that whites did not want because they were too dangerous or menial. In some cases, the men left their families and head west to work on government-sponsored programs. Throughout this time period, many African Americans remained hopeful of how life could be different. They were able to go on even though obstacles stood in their way. Despite segregation, some African Americans were able to graduate from universities. Others made major contributions in the sciences and the arts. African Americans continued to dream of how life could change. Because they did that, today there are thousands of African Americans living in the U.S. that are able to go to colleges. They are able to do that because they are no longer segregated, because the people before us fought to make a change. Some say that the Great Depression wasn't really that bad because it had no impact on many rich people and that up to 40% never faced real hardship. Personally, I feel that the Great Depression was a time that should not be repeated, a global incident that happened for the worse, not the better. But because of the Great Depression, lessons were learned and events happened that would not have otherwise. When we fast forward 70 long years, we still remember what happened as a tragic time in not only American but also the globe's history. In modern days, is there still segregation? Yes, of course. But is it as bad? No. Segregation doesn't have to be just with black people. You can segregate men from women, children from adults, Asians from Americans. But do we see that in our community and our daily lives? No. The events or things that happened in the past affect the present and the future as we know it. The segregated restaurants, churches, schools, and water fountains no longer exist in modern-day America because of sacrifices that people in the past have made, because they kept hope.
The way this world shall be when we go walking